Welcome to today's podcast, and today we're continuing our journey down some of the warning signs about things to consider when you're getting into a relationship.
Yeah, I think last week we talked about more of the red flags, the sort of very more obvious factors or warning signs in relationships. So really red flags where you might want to seriously consider whether you might want to exit the relationship sooner rather than later. Whereas today we're looking at the kind of yellow flags. These might be issues that come up in the relationship that can be significantly problematic, but there might also be issues that you can actually address with your partner in the relationship, either through more effective communication or couples therapy or whatever means you have at your disposal. So let's look at the first one. The first one that we looked at was having a partner who is very inconsistent in their attention to you or in their commitment to the relationship. So they're doing this kind of ghosting bit where they pop up here and then sometimes they're around, sometimes they're not. There is a sense in this from this partner is that they're not quite there for you. They're doing something that I think you looked this up as a sort of colloquial term, which is called submarining.
Yeah, so submarining, so they submerge for a while, then kind of pop up. And I think actually for most people, this is going to be a red flag early on. I mean, I don't think this is just a yellow flag.
Okay, yeah.
Because this sort of behaviour early on is an indicator for something really to kind of be concerned about later. And it seems to be more and more common. I speak to so many people who basically are online dating, and they've even been with somebody for a few weeks, a few months even, and suddenly the person just disappears for a while and then pops back. And the effect can be really, quite devastating for somebody. And there could be many different reasons for this. Clearly there's things going on with the other person's attachment style. There could be kind of challenges in their life. But, I think in terms of, having that commitment in your relationship, it's a really, real red flag.
Well, yeah, for me it's more of a yellow flag in a sense, because it's a sign of a strong ambiguity in the partner. So they might have a foot in the door, but they're not entirely sure yet. Do I really want to step into this relationship? Now, this may or may not change. I think where it becomes a red flag is if this goes on for a long period of time. And I don't really know what the cutoff time period is here. But if you're in a relationship, if you've been in a relationship for quite some time already with a partner who does this kind of submarining, then I think it's something that needs addressing. Whereas in the early stages of a relationship, it might still be this kind of ambivalence that might be there with somebody who's not entirely sure yet whether they can dare to step into a relationship or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, thinking about, say you've been dating someone for a while and you've been getting quite close and, it could even be several weeks or a couple of months. And if somebody then just disappears with no contact for 3 months, I think for most people that's going to be like a definite no.
Sure.
But it can leave somebody feeling like, was it something I did? Was there something wrong with me? And then feeling, well, this person's back, they seem interested, and then kind of, I think sometimes that roller coaster ride produces that sort of, for some people, they then get involved and too closely involved, and it can happen again. I mean, I think, I think when there's a pattern there, it's really just something to watch out for in the future, and knowing that potentially you could get hurt again.
No, I agree with you. I think it also depends on the manifestation of this. Yeah, absolutely. If you're in a early relationship with someone who kind of disappears for a month or so, then I'd be a bit concerned about that too. I agree.
Yeah. So let's go into our second one, which I put down as sort of holier than thou. So this is kind of, again, just a yellow flag. But I saw recently that a lot of people now in their dating profiles apparently are thinking it would be very appealing to put things about how they've done their own sort of soul searching, they've been for their therapy, they've sorted themselves out. And again, sometimes people give this real talk about, how enlightened they are, how kind of developed they are as a person. And my question would always be, those people who tend to flog how developed they are, how kind of enlightened they are, they tend to be the ones that I think lack self-awareness.
Yes.
Yeah, because the people who are more genuinely have done that soul searching and maybe are more enlightened, they don't have to tell everybody that they're enlightened or that they've done all that work. It just comes across.
Well, also it means that there is a presentation here of someone who says, I'm a finished product and I'm done, so to speak. Whereas, of course, we know that, we never stop developing as human beings. And in particular, I think what this it might present as a red flag, because it says that there might be a rigidity by this other person and a stance of, well, I am sorted and you're not, which means that they don't engage in a sort of actively dynamic relationship dynamic where both partners take responsibility for their behaviors, for what they put into the relationship, what kind of work they put into the relationship. Now, if you are in a relationship with someone who says, well, I'm already sorted, then they're not likely to do that. And that means that there are challenges here in this relationship. It can't move on, it can't develop, it can't grow.
Yeah, and the amount of times I've come across people who either at work or in relationships, the person they're working for or a person in a relationship is constantly saying what a moral person they are, but to the other person they experience them being treated really badly, completely the opposite. But it's that need to actually say, what a great person they are. It's sometimes, I think it's something to really kind of question and just be aware of as that potential kind of yellow flag or even red flag.
Yeah. In particular, as I say, it's sort of like, I suppose everyone oversells a little bit in the early stages of a relationship, and we all try to show our best side and want to kind of show how wonderful we are and how amazing. But if this continues, I think if this continues, this sense of also of rigidity around, well, I'm sorted here, I don't need to do anything anymore, that's when it becomes problematic, I think.
Yeah. So should
okay,
we move on to...
we got? So we've got listening here. If you are in a relationship with somebody who you feel never listens to you. Now, I mean, that's a very common complaint. I would say that's the number one complaint that I always hear when I work with couples in couples therapy. They both claim that the other doesn't listen. So that, of course, is always a big issue. And if you find yourself in a relationship where you feel there's no interest from the other party, they're not really paying much attention to you, to your concerns, where there's a lack of curiosity or engagement or inquiry, indeed, into what your experiences of the world, then I think that is a yellow flag, because again, how are you both growing as two people in a relationship if there is no curiosity or interest?
Absolutely, and I think some of this may also be cultural or how you grow up, and I experience this sometimes as a complaint more about sometimes with men, and I don't want to put sort of a gender bias into this, because I don't think it's always true, and I think certainly it's not genetic, but certainly I think maybe in the past, certainly in the UK, where men have not spoken about emotions so much, for example, there is that more slightly less being used to how do you explore these things, how do you talk about some of these things, and sometimes that can come across as not engaging.
So it's exactly, because there's a lack of expression and it's also a lack of listening, both sides, the communication side.
So this can be something obviously that can be developed, and I think that that's really important to know that everyone can learn to listen better. And even if you think you listen well, which ties in with our last point, is you might think you're a great listener, but maybe your partner doesn't. You can always develop better listening skills, and that's partly what we do in our course, The Relationship Made. We've got a whole module on really how you communicate and how you listen better, and it's so important to develop a fulfilling relationship.
Good. Okay, what else have we got here? So we have this point about exes. Now, if you're in a relationship or you've just met someone who is constantly putting down all their exes and putting them in a very negative light and complaining about them and saying, oh, my partner so-and-so was really terrible, oh, what a terrible person, etc. Then again, there's this sort of question of what's going on here. Is your partner also able to, have they got capacity to take some responsibility for what went wrong in previous relationship? Have they got the capacity to reflect on what went on in the relationship and why it might have ended?
I mean, I'd question as well if it's a new relationship and you're going out on your first couple of dates. If somebody's talking about their exes in huge detail at all, it's probably a kind of warning sign.
Yeah.
You know, if they're
What
saying,
do you make of that?
if they're saying as well how wonderful their last ex was and talking about that for half an hour, that might also be, you think, like, why are they always just talking about how great their last ex was?
Well, it's a sign of maybe that there's something unfinished yet, yeah?
Yeah, and they're not able to be fully engaged in interest in you. Because again, our last one about listening is that interest in each other, which, you know, part of that may be talking, well, for some people about exes. For some people, they don't like to. It's, you know, they may not be comfortable doing that, and I think that's fine as well. But I think it's that whole thing that you mentioned about blaming. And we can get this in terms of if somebody's very hostile towards their exes or other people, if they're kind of quite negative about people in general. That could also be that warning sign, is there's certain things within them that they're projecting onto other people. So that could be, you know, something to really pay attention for. Again, because we're trying to, you know, most people are trying to put on a good positive impression for the other person at the beginning. And sometimes, you know, they may cover some of this up. And you might spot it with things like, how do they treat people around them? Like if you're out at a restaurant. You know, I've read some people saying that a good way to get a sense of how somebody really is see how they treat the people, like somebody who's waiting the table or other people around them. Are they rude to them? Are they kind of aggressive with them? Because that could show some of their true character as well.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the point here also with the sort of, I think the main point here in terms of this flag here, warning sign, is this, the ability to also acknowledge that you bring unhelpful behavior into the relationship. And when a relationship is ended, there are always two people in the relationship. You're a system, couple system. So, you know, what is it that both of you contributed? If there's only ever blaming the other person, then there's no learning, and that means that gets brought forward into the new relationship as well, and that's the problem.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the next point is, well, if you're both at different life stages. So this is something that can be really significant. I mean, you might go on a couple of dates with somebody and you really like them, but they're at a different stage in their life. For example, maybe you want to have children, but they just totally don't. They just want to go out and party all the time. You know, this could be problematic. You know, you might like a lot about them, and it's that kind of weighing up the pros and cons. But, you know, if you're not able to kind of match in these values and where you want to be in your relationship at that time, it's probably going to be a recipe for, you know, unhappiness, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think some disparities might, you know, you might be able to address, but when it comes to, for example, the question of children, that's a really big one. If one of you wants children and the other one doesn't, I think, you know, there will always be a degree of unhappiness, potentially. It doesn't have to be, because you might find a resolution, but if you can't find a resolution, then that is really going to be problematic for both partners, I think. The partner who then might give up on the idea of having a child and might regret that for the rest of their lives, and also the partner who then has the child but very reluctantly, kicking and screaming, is being dragged into family life. So I think that is a really big one.
Yeah, and there could be other types of stages or other kind of other sort of different values as well. For example, one person wanted to explore relationships with other people as well, of a more kind of open relationship, whereas one of you wants the monogamous relationship. You know, this is also going to be a very challenging situation, and ultimately going to be, well, quite unhappy for at least one person.
Yes, that's right. Okay, what else have we got on the list? Another potential yellow flag. It doesn't have to be a warning sign, but it should, maybe you should stop and listen and think about what's going on here, is if all your friends, your trusted friends, basically really, really dislike this new partner that you have, or the partner that you have that might have been a longer term partner, and really don't want to spend any time with them, or are very, very skeptical about this partner, or express some very serious reservations about your partner, then there might be something in it. Now there might not be, but I would assume. I mean, I know my friends. If they all tell me that you've got to be a bit cautious with this partner that you've just brought home, then I would want to know a bit more about that. What would you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes we do, at the beginning stages of a relationship, we have those rose-coloured lenses on. So we're just seeing the good points about somebody else. But our friends don't have those filters. They see that person as they generally would see other people who might introduce them to. Now, it might be that, of course, that your friends just have totally different interests, and the person you're having a relationship doesn't have those same interests, and that could be just one of those things. But I think listening to your friends, and I think particularly if there's more than one friend who's given this feedback, then it's something to pay attention to. Friends could dislike somebody for multiple reasons, though. It might be that even friends are jealous of you having a partner because you won't be spending so much time with them. So there could be other factors. But certainly in the past, I think there have been times where I wish my friends had given me feedback about a relationship that I was in. Just then I could have avoided actually, being in a relationship for a period of time, which wasn't very healthy.
No, I completely agree. I wish the same. Yeah, sometimes friends want to protect it. They want to be kind, and therefore they might not point out their concerns about your new partner. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else have we got on the list here? We've got also a situation where one partner has got quite significant mental health problems. And of course that could be a range of issues. It could be more severe depression, it could be anxiety, it could be all sorts of things. And if your partner is relying on you as the only source of support, that can be very problematic. Now, of course, when you're in a loving relationship, you want to be emotionally there for your partner. You want to support them as best as you can. But when there are significant mental health issues, or let's just say chronic ongoing mental health issues, I think it is really important to also remember that your partner might need another source of help, not just you.
Absolutely. I think the clear thing here is it's not about somebody having mental health problems that's a red flag. It's about them relying on you as their source of support or as their therapist. So, in a relationship, you don't get into a relationship or into a healthy relationship because you're just wanting to support them. But sometimes if we're used to that from our past, like we had to support our parents or we constantly felt we had to help others, that may somehow cause us to feel that sort of attraction in a relationship because we're used to it. But it's not a healthy basis for a relationship. There was an episode of Frasier that we watched a little while ago. So Frasier, the show on television about the radio psychiatrist, where he gets involved with somebody else, and it turns out that she's just using him as a therapist. And again, at some point, he felt quite good and kind of flattered, and it can be boosting for the self-esteem, thinking you're helping this person.
You need it.
But you need it. But ultimately, it creates this codependency, and it's sort of, it can be very unhealthy.
Absolutely. Have we got time for more, Tom?
Yeah, so let's move on to another one. So let's move on to, constantly requiring reassurance. Again, this can be a sign of the attachment style. So it could be an anxious attachment style. So somebody being uncertain about the relationship, and it could manifest in many ways. Like it could be sort of constantly needing to know, do you love me? And I think there's this challenge which I've seen with a lot of people that sometimes they haven't been told that when they're younger, like the family hasn't been expressive, but they really needed to hear it more. And I think there's a healthy balance. I think you need to hear this. I think it's important to hear it as well as experience it in other ways. That's my personal view. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. But if you need to hear it every minute, because, I know people, I've experienced people who they message their partner literally every 10 minutes and just say, love you, or, something along those lines, or some other sort of reassurance. and it's so many times an hour that it can be overwhelming. Now, if both people in a relationship need that, it kind of maybe can work out sometimes, although I question how healthy it is.
It's not healthy, no.
No, but you know, in terms of that constant need for reassurance, it's challenging.
Yeah, and it can be a form of control. It can almost tip over into a form of coercive control, because usually somebody who is coercively controlling is also very insecure and needs that constant reassurance that their partner is there for them. So I think it's this, again, it's a grey area, isn't it? Because to some extent we all need reassurance from our partner, and we all want to be told that we are loved in a consistent way by our partner. But when it becomes too much, when there's a real sense of it becomes quite suffocating or quite oppressive, I suppose. This sense of like, well, when you start to feel that you experience this as a huge burden, and it becomes overwhelming and becomes quite stressful, then that usually is a sign that something is not quite right here. It's too much demand.
And it's challenging as well, because I think the question is, how much is too much? Because as well, somebody who's anxiously avoidant or anxious avoidant may experience even any demands as too much and suffocating.
Yeah.
So there is this challenge in terms of, you know, what is too much? And certainly like texting multiple times through the day to have that reassurance, I would say is too much.
Yeah.
You know, occasionally when you speak to somebody, you're expressing you love them, I think I don't, you know, personally wouldn't see any issue in that unless you're having to do that all the time just for that.
It's a boundary question. It's a personal boundary question. It's okay as long as you feel comfortable with it. But when there's a sense of discomfort, then that tells you that something's not quite right, that needs addressing here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at another one. So yeah, we're going to talk about one more, which again is in the early stages of dating. And that's when the dating profile significantly differs from what the person is like when you actually meet them. And of course, you know, everyone tends to bump up their profile to some extent, or most people would. Like when you're going for a job, you know, if you haven't got much work experience or you haven't worked in sectors that you think are going to be appealing, you know, you might try to kind of portray yourself in the best possible light. And that's, you know, that's what we all do to some extent. But when it's completely different, like, you know, now if it's an AI image, you know, I've heard of people going on dates and they've, you know, the other person's enhanced their image with AI or kind of completely changed it. Or when you need to have a dog in the picture to make yourself, to think you're going to make yourself attractive, which there is. Is it dog fishing? I think it's called, where this happens. And I was reading about somebody who went out with somebody from a dating profile because they liked the dog in the picture. So it, you know, it can work for some people. But
yeah, exactly. It's this whole question of where it kind of crosses over into deception, doesn't it? So there's this, you know, there's a certain element of enhancement, and I'm sure everyone tries to embellish and enhance their experiences and their looks as best as they can, but when there's sort of lies used, I suppose, and big lies, small lies, I don't know where the boundary is, then it's a bit more problematic. When stories are being told that are not actually quite true, or I mean, this whole question around age, I don't know what you think about that. I mean, I know that lots of people lie in their dating profiles about their age and basically make themselves younger most of the time. Then, you know, okay, well, maybe that's all right, but if that never gets brought up later on, then there's already a sort of deception here in the relationship that generates a bit of mistrust, maybe. So I'm not quite sure that I can kind of quantify this or, you know, qualify this. Where is the line? It's getting problematic when you are in a relationship, when you assume that you're in a relationship with someone who actually might be in some ways quite different and might have concealed quite a lot of factors from you. Now, I think it's okay if that comes out later on, if that's discussed, if that's owned, if that's being confessed, so to speak, or owned up to. But if you find out, I don't know, a number of years down the line that your partner is in fact significantly older. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, so I think, blatant lying is a complete red flag. I mean, you might not put your age, that's one thing. But it's like, for example, when you see a house being advertised or a flat, if you're going to rent a flat and it says, fully functional or kind of like everything to hand. But that means is the room's the size of a bed, there's a sink that you can reach just by putting your arm out, the cooker, and it's like, you're trying to give it a distorted view, or somebody on their dating profile putting lots of interests. That really means that they're interested in dating lots of other women at the same time. It's sort of like rather than lots of interests and hobbies, again, that's going to be problematic. So it's sort of, what's being said, and you can't kind of try to get away with it by saying, well, I just put this down and I didn't specify what. That's still a lie. So I think it's, lying about your age is a lie. And that's, the deception later on. But I do think that, if you don't put your age down, that's a different thing. We should not have to. It's like when you go for a job interview, you don't put your age in the CV.
I agree. It shouldn't be a factor, but for some people it is a factor.
Yeah, but it's also challenging because, we know with some people, if they're older, they may not attract people because of that age, but actually they come across and they seem much younger when you meet them. So it can also bias people negatively. So that is a tricky one.
No, because there's so much prejudice towards age generally, isn't there? So it's complicated. But it's this whole question of honesty, transparency. How do you want to start this relationship? Ideally, you want to start it being as honest as possible. And but honesty is, again, it's a fine line about what you might want to not immediately put on the table, or we all have our shadow sides, the parts of us that we don't want to immediately show to this new person in our life, and then later on they find out about it. That is a normal part of relationship development, I think. But it's when it becomes this sort of almost a little bit manipulative behavior. I think that's when it's problematic.
It's like a year down the line, when you say, well, I thought you were a barrister. Oh, I meant baristra.
Yes.
So anyway, we're going to finish up today's podcast, and thanks for listening, and tune in next time, and we'll speak with you soon.
Take care until then.